Hello, BookTube. That last mail haul of the week, that wasn't the last mail haul of the week. This is the last mail haul of the week. I got another shipment of books. A little armful of stuff that I thought we'd go through together, since it feels wrong for me to go through the mail without you. So, we'll start these off. My assistant is at the ready. Can you see her? Oh, I want you to be able to see her. Oh, get it, Pete. We went on a long walk today, and she's feeling it now, because we've been cooped up. It's been cold. She doesn't like the cold, doesn't like the slush, doesn't like the snow, absolutely will not go out in the rain under any circumstances, so that limits us to spring and summer. And she probably's not going to, now that she's grown, she's probably going to turn up her nose at intense heat as well. We shall see. It's right around the corner, isn't it? It's almost March. And no matter what kind of, stubborn last-minute snow and sleet storms we get in March, they are rarities in March. The bulk of the worst part of winter is largely over in the last week of February. I think in the coming week, the Boston area is forecast to get maybe 2 different snow events, as meteorologists now say, but we'll see what comes of them. So what have we got here? Okay. All right. This first one I did not request. It comes out in June, thank God. I'm hoping that none of these things are March releases, because the March shelf is groaning with books. Far, far more books than I could ever review. I can read them all, but I can't write 800-word reviews of each one of them. There aren't enough days in the week. There's just no way. Anyway, a couple of people have suggested to me that could be my use for Goodreads. That instead, I originally thought maybe I would go through all of my backlist titles here and just write them up briefly for Goodreads to make to use Goodreads the way the rest of you do, as this sort of inventory of what I have read. That felt kind of pointless. It felt a little pointless to do. But then a couple of people that I know suggested, well, all of those books that you read in a given month that you don't get around to writing full-length reviews for, you could still review them. You could write 2 or 3 sentences assessing their worth and whether or not a reader should buy them, and put those on Goodreads, Goodreads is going to be 10 times the audience you would get anyway. An author of a book, for instance, let's say an off-the-beaten-track academic monograph on some historical subject that's really, really good, that author, these people told me, would be far more grateful for a positive review on Goodreads, where people are going to look for it, as opposed to on Open Letters Review that nobody knows about. So I'm contemplating. I'm mulling. That would open up a whole new. That would mean I would never let a book go without notice. It's just something about doing it on somebody else's website for somebody else's profit. I realize I shouldn't probably think that way, because regardless of who owns Goodreads or who uses it or who monetizes it or how, thousands and thousands and thousands of readers actually read it, and that's what I should be concentrating on. But anyway, this comes out in June, so I don't have to worry about it yet. This is by Ruth Kasinger, and it is called Slime. How Algae Created Us, Plague Us, and Just Might Save Us. It's called Slime. What do you think about when someone says algae? Most people think of pond scum. What they don't know is that without algae, none of us would exist. And this book is the vital tool for understanding this slimy microorganism and how it is essential in a much larger scale. Okay. There are many algae on Earth as there are stars in the universe. Okay, digest that for a minute, because I certainly didn't know that. There are as many algae on Earth as there are stars in the universe. And they have been essential to our life on the planet for eons. Algae created the Earth as we know it today, with its oxygen-rich atmosphere, abundant oceans, and coral reefs. Crude oil is made of dead algae, and algae are the ancestors of all plants. Today, seaweed production is a multi-billion-dollar industry. with algae hard at work to make your sushi, chocolate milk, beer, paint, toothpaste, shampoo, and much more. Okay, I'm sold. I'm absolutely sold. So bring it on. In June, I will learn everything there is to know about slime. Okay. All right. Great. We're off to a fine start. This next one is heavy. It could be a finished copy, in which case I'm having post-traumatic stress disorder flashbacks because I don't want it to add to March, and I certainly don't want it to be February. February's on its last gasp here, so let's see. Oh, no. Okay. All right. This is a March book, but it's a double. It's a double. It's by Leo Damrosch. We saw this just the other day. This is The Club by Leo Damrosch. It's his book about James Boswell and Samuel Johnson, at the suggestion of Joshua Reynolds, the famous painter, decided to gather a whole bunch of chatty face intellectuals in London together in one place every week. That's some of them right up there, and just chat about books and whatnot. Boswell, whenever he was there, was feverishly taking notes, and there were other people too who were aware. The Tavern Owner, for instance, and a lot of people that gathered just to watch and listen were aware that this was a historic thing. That gatherings like this don't happen every millennium. And this is a new book about that subject, potted biographies of all of the participants, and a look at what it was. You know, probably there'll be long digressions on cafe culture, the coffee house culture of the time, the boom that it was undergoing, a place where you could go for that sort of thing. This is an author who did a big biography of Jonathan Swift that was fantastic. So this is just a double. That's all. It's just a mistake. Let's move on here. Let's move on to this next one. Also fairly heavy. Also probably a finished copy. Okay. All right. This is. It is indeed a finished copy. It's not anything I requested, so now the big question is when? When is it a finished copy? What is the date on it? Mid-March. Okay, so this goes on the March shelf. All right, this is by Farah Pandith, and it's called How We Win. How cutting-edge entrepreneurs, political visionaries, enlightened business leaders, and social media mavens can defeat the extremist threat. Let's see here. There's a war being fought and we are losing it. That's the first line of the pub sheet. There's a war being fought and we are losing it. Despite the billions of dollars spent since 9/11 trying to defeat terrorist organizations, the so-called Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, and other groups remain a terrifying geopolitical threat. In some ways, the threat has grown worse. The 9/11 hijackers came from far away. The danger today can come from anywhere, from the other side of the world to across the street. Unable to stem recruitment, we seem doomed to a worsening struggle with a constantly evolving enemy that remains several steps ahead of us. Unfortunately, current policies seem almost guaranteed not to reduce extremist violence, but instead to make it easier for terrorists to spread their hateful ideas, recruit new members, and carry out attacks. This is about terrorism. This is about Al-Qaeda. This is not about homegrown radicalization. I wonder if that'll be any part of it. Let's see here. We actually possess the means right now to inoculate communities against extremist ideologies. In How We Win, Farah Pandith presents a revolutionary new analysis of global extremism, as well as powerful but seldom used strategies for vanquishing it. Drawing on her visits to 80 countries and hundreds of interviews and focus groups she's conducted around the world, and her high-level experience in the Bush and Obama administrations, Pandith argues for a paradigm shift in our approach to combat extremism, one that mobilizes the expertise and resources of diplomats, corporate leaders, mental health experts, social scientists, entrepreneurs, local communities, and most of all, global youth themselves. There's a war being fought, and we can win it. This is how. Okay. All right. Well, who is the author when she's at home? She's a diplomatic entrepreneur, foreign policy strategist, and former diplomat. A world-leading expert in countering violent extremism. She's a frequent media commentator and public speaker. She served as a political appointee under President H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama, and she was the first ever special representative to Muslim communities, serving both Secretaries Hillary Clinton and John Kerry. Okay. All right, so she's an expert. I would think, myself, not being an expert, that the easiest way to combat the spread of extremist ideologies, especially of a nature like Al-Qaeda, would be a lesson that we've learned in the last 2 years. It's a bit of an unsavory lesson. It runs against the grain of some of the founding tenets of America. And it can be summarized in one sentence. Deplatforming works. Very uncomfortable for me to say such a thing. Very uncomfortable for anybody like me to think that. But no denying the results. You don't have lunatics making huge amounts of money and reaching huge amounts of people if you deplatform them. I don't, just for the sake of an illustration, a disaffected young man in Peoria, suburb in America, playing video games and surfing the web and going to school and maybe holding down a part-time job to help with his free time money, has almost no ability to be recruited by Al-Qaeda or any splinter cell like Al-Qaeda if the websites where that recruitment will take place ban Al-Qaeda and those splinter groups. If Twitter and Facebook and YouTube simply deplatform obvious extremist groups, it's much harder to reach out and poison other minds if you can't do the reaching out part. But that could be simplistic. It seems simple to me. It seems right now YouTube and Twitter and Facebook do an abysmally poor job of policing their own content. Abysmally poor. It is simplicity itself, for instance, to go on YouTube or on Twitter or Instagram, for instance. God's help us. Instagram is the Wild West. It's incredibly easy to go on any of those platforms, look around, and find horrifying things. And then you think, well, okay, it's here and it's a First Amendment thing and they're a private company and the laws don't apply to them, et cetera, et cetera. You think, well, I'm an adult, I can stand to look at this stuff. It helps to inform my worldview. Think about all the people who aren't adults, who have just as easy access to it as you do. No. Deplatforming works because the world is built that way. The world is built on platforms now. So if you deplatform somebody, they're hollering in their own garage. They're not really recruiting people. I'm interested to see. She is the expert, not me. So so this is a March book that has to be included. I have to include this. I have to work it into the March schedule. Oh my God! All right. Let's move on here. Went on a book frenzy today. Just a book frenzy, a slow motion frenzy, because I'm as old as dirt. But I went on a book frenzy of just pulling things off shelf. What is this doing here? It was a small taste of the grand library reorganization that I still want to do in 2019. Plans like that, pulling all your books off shelves, crossing your legs and sitting on the floor to examine them, to think out where you want things to go and what you want to get rid of. Plans like that tend to lose momentum when it's 10 degrees Fahrenheit and when the floor of the room is freezing cold. There's a reason why it's called spring cleaning. So I have a feeling that right around the time that my garden takes off, my grand book reorganization will take off as well. And the grand book reorganization, one of the key foundational pillars of it is going to be a grand book reduction. A reduction. I know I've always said, ideally, my entire personal book collection should fit in this room. Because my personal space, I always make a little room like this, wherever I go, wherever I live, if I can, I make a little space like this. My tiny little pre-World War I bed, a bunch of pillows, a dog or many dogs, and all of my books. And ideally, they should all fit in here. They're not going to. And they really, for right now, there's no crushing reason for them to. 2 rooms of books ought to be enough, though. So, anyway, what have we got here? Okay. right, there's another one I did not request. These are coming up strangers to me. This is due in July, thank God. I can put it off just a bit. This is by Maureen Callahan, and it is called American Predator, the hunt for the most meticulous serial killer of the 21st century. Very interesting subtitle. So, the most meticulous, and of the 21st century. We're now racking up our own, another century of serial killers. What have we got here? Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, Jeffrey Dahmer. The names of the notorious serial killers are usually well known. They echo in the news and in public consciousness. But most people have never heard of Israel Keyes, one of the most ambitious and terrifying serial killers in modern history. A predator who struck at random, attacking strangers and burying kill kits all over the United States. Oh my God. Keyes had no particular MO or victim type, a fact that helped him go undetected by law enforcement for over a decade. I'm amazed they caught him at all. It's usually the way you do it with these people. That's usually how you catch them, is by figuring out what particular thing they like to kill and in what particular way. So a serial killer who just picks people at random, oh, that would be a nightmare. A nightmare. Let's see here. The exact extent of his crimes is still unknown, no doubt. No doubt if that's true. I've never heard of this guy. But he may have murdered almost a dozen people, if not more. I guarantee you it's more. If he killed people for pleasure and had no particular pattern, no blondes, no little kids, no fat people, if he had none of the categorical kinks that serial killers almost always have, then I bet the total is much higher. I wonder if he's dead. Maybe we don't know how many. In this thrilling, vivid chronicle, the author, who's a journalist, takes readers deep into the investigation of Keyes' nightmarish crimes and inside the mind of a serial killer who defied all expectations and categorization. American Predator begins in 2012 in a singularly isolated environment, Anchorage, Alaska. How did I know it was Alaska? It would either be backwoods Alaska or it would be Florida. With the disappearance of Samantha Koenig, a young girl working on a roadside coffee shack. The case eventually led to Keyes' arrest, but when the FBI apprehended him, they had no idea how unprecedented a criminal they had on their hands. This was a man who buried cash, weapons, and body disposal tools in remote locations across the country, and over the course of 14 years, would fly to a city, rent a car, and drive thousands of miles in order to use them. Oh my God. Oh my God. Pure predator. Oh my God. He would break into houses, abduct his victims in broad daylight, and kill and dispose of them in mere hours. He killed strangers, men and women, couples and singles, leaving a trail of monstrous crimes in his wake, many of which are still unsolved. And then he would return home, resuming a life of quiet, reliable construction worker devoted to his only daughter. Oh my God, this sounds fascinating. Okay, so this comes out in July. That sounds utterly fascinating. Good Lord, Israel Keyes. Okay, so that automatically raises a question with me. Just earlier today, I got this fascinating thing, The New Evil. All about monsters just like Israel Keyes. And now I wonder, is this up to date enough for him to be in here? Let's see. Let's see if Israel Keyes is in here. No, he's not. Okay, no, he's not. He's not in here. So maybe they don't go up to the 21st century. Wow, okay, though. Nevertheless. Okay, that sounds fascinating. All right, then we have this last one. It's very heavy. Could be more than one book. And that'll be it. And I promise this will be it. There's no chance I'm going to get another late delivery. There you go, baby. Oh, you've had it. Oh, this thing's immense. What is this? Oh, okay, this one I did request. This one I did request. Looks fascinating. It's right up Steve's alley because these 1,000-page works of history I just love. This is by Simon Reed Henry, and it's called Empire of Democracy, the remaking of the West since the Cold War. Look at the size of that thing. This is, do I have a page count? 850 pages in the advanced copy. The finished copy will be a brick. Half a century ago, at the height of the Cold War and amidst world economic crisis, Western democracies were forced to undergo a profound transformation. Against what some saw as a full-scale crisis of democracy, with race riots, anti-Vietnam marches, and the wave of workers' discontent sowing crisis from one nation to the next, a new political economic order was devised, and the post-war social contract was torn up and written anew. The author gives us a panoramic history of the Western world since the 1970s to the present day and illuminates how this pivotal time in history set the stage for today's incarnation of Western liberal democracy. Wow. Okay. All right. This is the first book of its kind. An articulate, digestible account of the events of Western democracy over the last 4 decades. That is not the first book of its kind. That's not the 50th book of its kind. But it's nice to know that that's what it's being described as. Written compellingly and authoritatively. The author covers an epic narrative of events that have molded our age, starting with the end of the post-war golden age through the current era. By the late 20th century, a new crop of politicians, Thatcher, Reagan, Mitterrand, Kohl, titans. I remember reading about them every day in something that used to be called the newspaper. We didn't have the internet. I read about those figures every day. Every new little detail of them, every day. These figures led Western democracies to victory in the Cold War and the resulting economic boom. At the same time, however, these leaders set their respective populations up for future trouble. A fiasco in Iraq, a financial crisis in the early aughts, and ultimately the anti-liberal surge of today's politics. Okay. All right. Please tell me. That's something this big. Please tell me this is not another thinly disguised Trump book. It can't be. This author has to have been working on this for a very long time. Far earlier than 2016. So who is Few Professors? He's a writer and prize-winning scholar. He's associate professor at Queen Mary University of London and a senior researcher at the Peace Research Institute in Oslo. Few professors possess the expertise across geopolitics, political philosophy, and history in the way that Simon Reed Henry does. Okay. All right. Well, this is exactly my kind of thing. I'm sorry that's very predictable, but it's nevertheless true. This is exactly my kind of thing. So I'm just curious to know how it breaks down. It is enormous. It is well over 700 pages long in just the text alone. And the first part is Democracy Unbound, which goes from 1971 to 1989. Then the next one is Novus Ordo Seclorum, and it goes from 1989 to 2001. And then the last third of the book, the last 300 pages, is the post 9/11 world. So, all right. So, did I mention when this comes out? This comes out in June. It's going to be tough to wait. It probably doesn't strike many of you as something to jump right on, but it's going to be tough to wait. This is. I was paying scrupulously close attention to all the events chronicled in this book. Half the time, I was writing about them for money. Half the time, I was writing for an audience, observing these events. This is a history of my time. It's going to be hard not to just junk everything and read this tonight, and I absolutely cannot do that because I have a pile of February books remaining that desperately need attention. They need love. They can't just shuffle off into the night. There's more February for me to do before I turn to March. I'm going to pounce on March. Try and get as many of those innumerable books done as possible. But so anyway, that is our mail haul. That was not a bad mail haul. Okay, so Empire of Democracy. Modern times. The 70s to now. For a lot of people that are listening to me, we lived it as adults, paying close attention to the news. I'm not the only one. For a lot of times, this is our conscious life. For some of us, a little bit earlier than that, but still, the 70s is... all right, so, and then American Predator, about a 21st century serial killer who goes home to a normal life. So he spends the week working as a construction worker and taking care of his daughter, and then decides, well, this weekend I'm planning something special. I've got a chainsaw and a body bag buried outside of, Tampa, so I'm going to fly there and kill someone at random, chop them up, and dispose of them. Fascinating. I'm fascinated by serial killers anyway, which is why I was very glad to get this thing in the last mail haul, The New Evil, which categorizes serial killers across 22 categories, a whole spectrum of evil from beginning to end. just catnip to me. And then How We Win, which goes on the March pile and is by an expert in counter-terrorism, counter-indoctrination. It sounds like. It's going to be fascinating, of course, because she knows the subject 10 times better than I do. Then A Double of the Club by Leo Damrosch. Intellectual history of a micro-minute in London at a micro-minute of time that's made notable by the fact that the club's members are people that we still regard today. We still read their work. We still consider them titans. I'm not sure what kind of it's different. I'm not sure what kind of a wide audience this book will have. His previous book, a biography of Jonathan Swift, of course, plenty of people are made to read Gulliver's Travels in school, and biographies have a sort of self-contained magic about them anyway. But this book, I'm not really sure. I will think about it. And then the last one is Slime, all about algae. Everything you're afraid that you want to know about algae, but we're afraid to ask. So there you go. That is our absolutely positively last mail haul of the week. But I will be back. There's still plenty of other bookish stuff to talk about. Thank you, BookTube.